Welcome to DMV Spotlight on ESPN 630, the sports capital, where we shine a light on local stories from the District, Maryland, and Virginia area to inform, enlighten, and inspire you. Local organizations doing the same. I'm Barbara Britt. My guest this morning on DMV Spotlight on ESPN 630 is Dr. Jessica Sutter. She is on the D.C. Board of Education, representing Ward 6. And Dr. Sutter got her Ph.D. at the University of Maryland, right there at College Park. She went to Loyola up in Baltimore. She has taught in public middle schools in Los Angeles and here in D.C. Don't mess with this woman. We're talking with her today about schools in the district. If you've ever spent time with middle schoolers, you know what I am saying. And we're going to talk about some of the options that students have here in the district, including D.C. charter schools, which seems to be a little bit close, near and dear to your heart. So I just want to thank you so much for joining me this morning on DMV Spotlight.
Thanks for having me, Barbara.
Thank you. So, well, first of all, I just want to get into a little bit of your background because as I was reading your resume, as it were, you really are one of those people who just loves education.
It's true.
Tell me why.
I always loved school. I thought school was a great, fun place. You get to see your friends. You get to learn new things. It seemed to me a magical place. And so when a professor in college said to me, "Have you thought about being a teacher?" and I hadn't, I started too. I majored in political science, but I did a 2-year post-college service program teaching Catholic school in Chicago and ended up falling right into loving middle school. And it's funny that you say, anyone who spends time with middle school students might be surprised, but I think you find the group of kids you like, and middle schoolers are my favorite.
Yeah, it is. It's such a fun age because it is very in between. It's so hard for them. I wouldn't go back for love or money in the middle school.
Oh, no, I wouldn't go back to being a middle schooler,
No.
but I do enjoy getting to spend time with them, hearing about what they want to do, hearing about the vision they've got for their own future, what they're dreaming about, and helping them learn about the world to make that real.
That is so exciting. So we're right at that time of year when students are going back to school. DC students are going back tomorrow. And one of the options that DC students have are DC charter schools. So give us a short history lesson, Dr. Sutter, teacher,
Sure.
on DC charter schools and how they came to be and what purpose they serve now.
Sure. So let me just say a little bit about the fact why I know so much about charter schools. So I ended up teaching in a charter school in Los Angeles and then one in Washington, D.C. When I went to graduate school, I studied more about charter schools and their policy, and I actually wrote my dissertation about charter schools in Washington, D.C. So I spent a lot of time learning about them. So D.C. got charter schools in 1996. A law was passed to allow for the creation of publicly funded but run by nonprofit organization schools called charter schools. So all of the charter schools in DC are public schools. They're publicly funded by the same tax dollars that fund neighborhood public schools that are run by DCPS. And every child in the district can attend a public charter school if they want to. There's no tuition, there's no admissions requirements, there are no tests allowed. Every child who can attend DC public school can also attend a DC public charter school.
So then what is the difference then?
Great question. So in DC public schools, where I live determines which schools I get to go to. Either I can absolutely have the right to go to the school in my neighborhood, or I can apply to schools that are close by and get something called a proximity preference within DC public schools. Charter schools don't do any of that. So any charter school anywhere in the city, I can apply to through the My School DC lottery. And if there are enough seats, I can go. If there aren't enough seats, we actually hold a lottery for students, and we pull numbers, and students are admitted based on the pull of their lottery number into a charter school.
So it's not competitive in terms of scoring or tests or where you live or anything like that. It truly is, quote, as much as I hate the expression, the luck of the draw.
Absolutely. And it is unfortunate that we don't have every student who wants to attend a school isn't lucky enough to attend that first choice school, but it is absolutely based on luck of the draw, not on admissions policies of any sort.
Okay, so now my bad memory is remembering that we had a little issue with the Duke Ellington School.
Correct.
And that was kind of an ugly situation where certain people gave themselves preference to send their own children to some of the schools that we all think, oh, wow, that's a pretty good school. Has that all been eradicated at this point, to your knowledge?
So I think the state superintendent's office has done a lot of work to review the policies and procedures that were in place that led to folks getting admitted to Duke Ellington and not paid tuition. So taking a step back, DC has a lot of choices. You can go to the school in your neighborhood. You can apply to a charter school, or you can apply to some choice high schools that are run by DC Public Schools. Duke Ellington is one of those schools. So if you have an artistic gift and you want to audition and say, I think I'm an excellent dancer, I would like to spend my high school focused on arts, and I believe I deserve credit, the opportunity to attend this school, you can audition to Duke Ellington and get in. If you are a district resident and you get admitted, you're set. If you live in Maryland or Virginia, you can also audition to attend, but if you're admitted, you have to pay tuition. And the situation at Duke Ellington was that some families not living in the district, not paying DC taxes, were admitted and didn't pay tuition.
And that has to frost people who live in DC.
Oh, it does.
And say, wait a minute, that's taking a spot and a seat for my child who could have gone in there.
Correct. And I think with charter schools, the difference is that there's no auditions allowed, but there are specialty kinds of schools in the charter sector. So for instance, there is a Chinese language immersion school called Washington Yu Ying Academy. We don't have any full Chinese immersion schools in the DC public schools. So if Chinese language is something you want for your child, you would apply to this charter school. You don't have to have a proficient child to get them in. They don't have to speak Chinese when they arrive, but they will learn it if they're admitted to the school. And that's an option that's only available in the charter sector.
That is so exciting. How many charter schools do we have in the district?
So that's always a fun number because there are 66 charter school districts called local education agencies, or LEAs. We love jargon in education. So there are 66 LEAs. Each one of them is its own school district. And then within those 66 LEAs, we've got about 123 schools. So for instance, KIPP DC is a LEA. It's a charter district. It has this year 15 schools within its program.
Is that separate from regular DC public schools?
Correct.
Am I messing up my jargon?
Yep. So
okay.
The easiest way to think about it is DC Public Schools is a school district. KIPP DC is a school district. But within DC Public Schools, Eastern High School is a school. Within KIPP DC College Prep is a school.
Do kids, do parents know that these options exist, Dr. Sutter?
Great question. DC has so many choices, and as with anything, when you've got more choices, you get a little more confusion. So parents do know we have an event every December called EdFest that usually happens at the DC Armory, and all of the schools that participate in the My School DC lottery come and have tables, and parents can walk around the Armory for hours and visit schools they have an interest in, talk with representatives from the school, learn about the school. And then every January, the school lottery opens. If I want to attend any school in DC that is not my neighborhood school, I have to apply through the lottery. And parents can pick up to 12 schools and rank them in the order that they choose, and then they get admitted and they find out their lottery responses, usually in March. The one difference, and this is something that parents don't know about, and I always try and make sure they do. In Washington, D.C., we have free preschool. Any 3-year-old child by September 30th is eligible to attend preschool for free in a D.C. public school or public charter. But everybody who wants to send their 3-year-old to school has to participate in the lottery. Because it's not required that you send your 3-year-old to school, we don't save enough spaces for every kid in every building. You actually have to put in your name and get pulled in a lottery if you want your 3-year-old to go to school.
So what I really am hearing you say, Dr. Sutter, is that it's really on the parents. The parents got to step up, figure out what's available for their child, whether they have, let's say, a 2.5-year-old and they're looking at the fall and they're going to say, okay, I want my child in these schools, or what's available, or what's a best fit for my student.
I think that's exactly right. It really does put a lot of responsibility on parents to ask them to be knowledgeable about this and to navigate the system. But we do try within the district to provide a lot of supports to parents. We have this EdFest and My School DC, which actually is a parent hotline. You can call it and ask questions. You can call it and get assistance walking through the application, how to apply. They also have people who have office hours at DC public libraries or community centers to help with that process. The schools themselves will help. If you call your neighborhood school and say, I've got a kid who's going to be 3, I want them to go to school here, how do I do it? The school will help you. There are also lots of nonprofit organizations that provide this kind of help to families. And I'll put a plug in for the DC State Board of Education. Every person in the district has a representative on the state board, and all of us are very happy to take calls, to answer questions, to help families navigate this process.
Okay, so you're Ward 6, which
Correct.
is what particular area is
So
that?
Ward 6 is a huge swath of the city. We have Capitol Hill, the Navy Yard, and the Capitol Riverfront. the Southwest waterfront, all of H Street, all of Noma, and part of Shaw. So it's an enormous section of the city, and that all encompasses Ward 6.
And a huge cross-section of the best and the not-so-best that we have.
Tremendous. We have a wonderful wealth and diversity of neighborhoods. We've got newer neighborhoods with brand new high-rise buildings going up. We've got long-established single-family homes in our neighborhood. We've got housing project communities. We've got all kinds of residents who live in Ward 6, and all of them looking for great places to send their kids to school.
And they can talk to you directly.
Happily. I actually was on the phone with the My School DC hotline helping a parent get an answer to their question on the drive here.
You are awesome. And is it an elected position?
It is an elected position. So I was elected in November 2018. I was sworn into office in January of this year, and I will serve until 2022.
Is that was that a difficult process? I mean, was that your first foray, quote, into politics? Is it considered? It is considered politics.
It is considered politics.
Sure.
I've always been behind the scenes in politics. So I was the secretary of the Young Democrats at Loyola. I worked for Mayor Gray in Washington, D.C., but I'd never been on the front side of politics. So it was a new adventure. But as you pointed out at the beginning, school is what I do. It's my favorite thing. And so running for political office focused on schools and education really was a lot of fun.
It was a natural fit. And do you all meet? Just tell me the structure quickly of the school board. Do you all meet together? How does it work?
Sure. So we have 9 elected members of the board, one for each ward of the city, and then one person who's elected at large to represent all the residents of the district. Everybody serves 4-year terms, and our elections are offset. So about half of us were elected last year. There'll be elections again in another year for new members. We meet twice a month publicly, once in a working session where the public is welcome to watch and to listen, but doesn't get the chance to testify or ask or answer questions. We have a public meeting when the public can testify. They can come about any issue that they have that they'd like to bring to the state board and have us answer questions for them or ask questions of them. And they can simply sign up via our offices. If you go to sboe.dc.gov, you can find all the information out about our meetings and about how to testify.
I'm speaking this morning with Dr. Jessica Sutter. She is on the Board of Education for Ward 6 here in the District of Columbia. And we're talking about the options that parents and their students have going to school in the District of Columbia. A lot of times, generally speaking, when we're talking about a big city, and you said that you have taught in Chicago and then also spent time in LA and now, of course, in DC, the nation's capital. And a lot of times we hear that our schools are not up to par. How do you respond to that when people give that generalization?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a thing that folks who work in cities and in schools face all the time. So we want every student who comes through the door of a public school to be ready for the life they choose. Whether that's going on to a 4-year college or a 2-year college, onto a training program or straight into a career, we want them to be ready for that. And we know that we've got 12 years to help them get there. When we have students who come in a little bit behind, if they enter preschool or kindergarten not knowing the developmentally appropriate things for their age, we've got to work to catch them up. And when you have a lot of students in cities who come in behind together, that's a little bit more work. If you have just a few students in every class who are a little bit behind, it's a little easier job. If you have a whole class of students who's very far behind, that's a tough task for any teacher, for any school to catch up on. But I think we do a great job in the district and have done an increasingly better job of recognizing that our kids need extra support. And that's both in the form of great teaching, but also in the extra kinds of outside supports, mental health supports, resources for their families, making sure that they're connected to all the services our city has to offer. We've got a lot of room to improve, but we're getting better.
And that circles back to what you said earlier, that there is free preschool in the District of Columbia if your child is going to be 3 as of September 1st.
Yes, and that's hugely important.
So there is, I mean, as you said, it is a, quote, lottery system, but if you want to get your child in, you can do that.
That's right.
And that's important to get them started on that road. Is it full day?
It is full day free pre-K for 3-year-olds and for 4-year-olds. And we're one of the few jurisdictions in the country that does it. And we've been doing it now. When I worked for Mayor Gray, we had it, and then we expanded it to include more 3-year-olds. And I think we now have more than 80% coverage, meaning we can have a public free pre-K spot for up to 80% of the 3-year-olds in the city, which is huge.
And that is huge. And then that dovetails very quickly with the childcare issue that we
Correct.
often talk about.
Absolutely.
Here it is. It's right here. It's available for you. So we just had some good news this week that came out, and you're going to help us take this apart because, again, it has a lot of terminology. But overall, Dr. Jessica Sutter, Board of Education, Ward 6, we got some good news for both D.C., quote, regular public schools and also D.C. charter schools, that their test scores are on the rise. Is that encouraging news?
I think that is encouraging news.
Okay.
So we always want, those of us who spend all day thinking about this work in education, always want to be better than we were the year before, the day before, the week before. So our students have gotten better. They've improved in their math scores, they've improved in their reading scores, and some groups of our students saw huge gains. So we saw within DC public schools some tremendous gains for high school students. We saw within DC charter schools some big gains for students who are part of a category we use for funding, which is called at risk. That describes students who are homeless, whose families receive public assistance, who are involved with the foster care system, or who are 1 year older than their stated grade. So we use that designation for extra funding. Students who get that designation come with a little bit more money to their schools, and their schools get a little bit more money to help serve them. But we saw great gains in charter schools for students who are considered at risk, and all of our students increased in their scores.
That is tremendous. And I want everyone listening to just think back for 1 second about being in high school and imagine you leaving high school and you do not have a home. You don't have a home to go home and slam the door on your mother or father. But that is a tremendous challenge.
Yeah, it is.
The nice word that I'm using.
It is. And it's wonderful that we're seeing these gains on average across the city. But one thing I would be remiss if I didn't point out is that we still see a huge gap. We call it sometimes the achievement gap amongst our students, that as all of our students have grown in their outcomes, our white students have increased faster. And so our African American and Latino students still see wide gaps between their achievement, how high their scores are, and their white peers. Same thing for our low-income students versus their higher-income peers. And that gap needs to get closed much more quickly than it has.
So what are some of the factors that cause that gap?
Sure. I think it's all the things that I mentioned before, these other kinds of supports that we know are at play when you've got different groups of students. So if you think about students who are homeless, it is hard to imagine how a student comes to school every day and focuses on their schoolwork as the first and most important thing if they know that there isn't a consistent place to go home to, if they know that there may not be consistent food available for their family, if they know that they may have other challenges or be assisting with childcare for younger siblings when they go home. So I know that our district is putting in place a number of different supports within schools. We have a new initiative coming out called the Connected Schools Initiative, which is going to help make sure that schools are connecting students and families to all the kinds of support services the city has to offer in terms of housing, in terms of counseling, in terms of nutrition assistance.
Is that what Mayor Bowser was just talking about?
That's what she was just talking about. We also have the Community Schools Initiative, which is a grant from the State Superintendent of Education to a number of schools across the city that help schools partner with community organizations like Families in Schools, like the Family Strengthening Collaboratives, like Mary Center, and make sure that those schools have someone in the school building who's actually helping families connect to all of these kinds of services. So in addition to the city helping do that, there's like a person who you as a parent can go and get to know and say, I've got this question about this service I need support and being connected to, and they'll help with that.
Do you ever feel like the schools are getting away from their main mission of educating when they are doing so many other, not just in D.C., it certainly happens in Montgomery County, Prince George's County, Fairfax County, our wealthier counties, as it were, even up in Howard County. Baltimore is a different story, but it's just, there are times when you go, wow, they're doing so much. Do they have enough time to do the reading, writing, arithmetic that we all understand is what education is?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I mean, I think that what we're asking schools to do is really important, because if we don't support students in being kids, we're not going to get them to do the learning that we want them to do. What I think is really important is that as we ask schools to do this extra work, we make sure we provide them with the resources, actual financial resources, as well as people to help connect families to these services. We can't expect a classroom teacher to be taking all this work on. So we need to make sure that if schools are trying to provide additional mental health supports, they have counselors, they have social workers available and accessible to them. If they're dealing with students who have asthma, that they have a consistent full-time school nurse who's available to help children manage those health needs. I think that it is a lot to ask of schools to do it, but it is too essential for children not to get them where they come every day.
And I know that we have, in other times when I've done these interviews and they talk about kids coming to school and they don't have enough food. I know in Fairfax County, they have certain schools that have food pantries, or they fill backpacks on the weekends so that the kids go home with a consistent supply of food, because you can't sit in your math class in first period when your stomach is grumbling.
Yeah. And I am consistently impressed by the work that our schools and districts do every day to be supportive for their students. So I've been in schools where they've taken me on a tour and been happy to show me the washing machine, where students who don't have access to consistent washing machines at home or trips to the laundromat can actually bring clothes to be laundered at the school to make sure that they do have clean clothes every day, that they have a clean gym uniform. I see schools that do that kind of preparing backpacks filled with school supplies. Or rather than sending home a list to families of saying, we need X box of tissues, 3 boxes of Lysol wipes, they make sure that all of that is provided at the school level for the first day, so that it's not on families to do one more thing, but that it's just ready to go so that children have what they need to learn on day one.
How much of this goes back to the fact that there is maybe not the family support that you would consider to be ideal for students, where there is a consistent income source, there's a parent there who's available for them, to have, food on the table and clean clothes and somebody to make sure you brushed your teeth, and truly things like that don't happen now, that I guess, I don't know, there was a day when that was sort of taken for granted, and that's not something we can do anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think every parent I've met loves their kids fiercely, and they want the absolute best for them. What I think is different is that some parents love their kids dearly and want the best for them and have the additional time in a day or have the financial resources to make that happen on their own. Other parents are working 2 jobs or 3 jobs or have been chronically underemployed, and so they need a little lift to make that happen. I think it's our job to, as educators and as politicians in the education system, to say every family loves their child. Every family wants the best for them. Starting at that point, what do we need to do to make sure that every family's child has what they need to be successful?
So taking that, Mayor Bowser has beefed up this Connected Schools program to help get there are a lot of resources in the district, and just getting them in the right place in the schools available. And then let's look back at some of these. I guess they're called PARC scores, Partnership for Assessment of Readiness for College and Careers.
Right.
Tell us how the district is doing. Break it down for us a little bit with public schools and then charter schools, which are also public schools, which we've just learned.
Yeah. So I will say I don't know too much about the details of the Connected Schools initiative yet. What I do know is that as we look at schools where we have a lot of students who have these additional challenges we talked about, whose families are experiencing homelessness or who are on public assistance. What I think this Connected Schools initiative and other efforts, community schools, et cetera, aim to do is to say, if we can provide in the place that children go to every day, in the place that their families are most deeply connected to, right? If you think about it, where's a place that a parent of an elementary school child goes every day? Well, they go to school Monday to Friday, and their child is there for 6 to 8 hours a day. So why not put all of these other resources at their fingertips in that place they go every day, rather than asking them to take a bus across town or go to another office or another place to access them? If we can put all these things in one place, we increase the connection children and their families have to their schools. We tighten the bonds of community that families have with their child's school, with their teacher, with their administrator, and we make it all available in a friendly, pretty low-risk place to go. I'm not asked to sort of step out of my comfort zone and go talk to yet another person to ask for help. I go to the same place every day where I know the friendly face, where
and
I know
people.
You. And they know me. They know my child. I feel welcomed. I feel at home. I think the thing that's really important about the difference between public schools and public charter schools is just because the public charter school may not be in my neighborhood doesn't mean it isn't a place where I feel warm, welcomed, and safe at home for me and for my child.
And I was going to ask that question. Does the fact that if you choose to go to a charter school that may be a little bit further for you and your student, does that mean then that the services you would be connected to might be further?
It's a good question. So one thing we do well in the city right now is that we provide for free public transportation for all students. So every kid in the city who attends a school gets a Kids Ride Free card that gives them access to Metro, Metro Rail, and Metro Bus. What we don't do very well is we don't provide for families to travel with their children. So if I'm a mom of a 3-year-old, my 3-year-old gets to travel free on public transit. I'm not sending my 3-year-old alone.
That's not happening.
So we've got to think about how we're helping families deal with these transportation challenges, since so many of our kids go to school not in their neighborhood. But as we think about those same connected services, my hope is that our schools will say, okay, here are the services we think that you and your children need. Here's where you live. Here are your options. These are services close to school. These are services close to home. How can we best help connect you?
And there's no reason that let's say you're a parent who lives in a certain area of the city and you choose to send your child to a charter school where you think they're going to have a better opportunity, that you still couldn't go to your local school, that you could walk to and avail yourself of services through that. Is that still true?
I think that would, I can't see any reason why it wouldn't be. I think that we have a lot of work to do as a city to better connect our schools to one another as well. When you look at these park scores, we have some schools that are just knocking it out of the park. They are showing incredible gains for students who have all these additional needs, and other schools right nearby that aren't having the same outcomes. I'd love to see more partnerships between them to work on all sorts of supports for students, academic and these other social supports.
Does it when you look at any of those numbers or these scores, does it say why? Does it give you an indication as an educator to say, why is this school doing so well and why is this school of floundering?
Yeah, it's a great question. The beauty and challenge of the data like these test scores is that it tells us just the first thing we want to know, which is who's doing a great job on the test. Then we've got to ask why and how. Last year, our state superintendent's office, which we call OSSE, O-S-S-E, put out a report called Beyond the Stars. Our schools get rated every year. And they took a look at schools that were doing a great job increasing growth in outcomes for their students. And they went and they did tours and they asked questions about what kind of things are your teachers doing to professionally develop themselves? What kind of supports are you putting in place for students? And they reported out on that for a whole series of schools. I hope we do that every year so that we take a look at these schools that achieve well and we ask, what are you doing differently? How did you make it happen? And will you share it with other schools so that other schools can learn from and try and do the same kind of things?
How much of the challenge is a truancy issue, just getting kids to go to school, especially as they get older? Obviously, when they're younger and their parents are on them, but certainly as they get to be in their teens, the kids don't want to go to school. They have other stuff they'd rather do. How much of that is an issue?
Yeah, so this is the kind of stuff that makes my head hurt because it's all deeply connected. So we want to make sure school is a place that children want to come. That's especially important for our teenagers,
and
middle schoolers and high schoolers.
And safe.
Absolutely. And if we teach great things and we provide them with a quality education, we hope they want to come. But if we know they have these challenges at home and we aren't helping them address them, we can't get that done either. So I think it's all deeply connected. Truancy matters. We want every child in school every day. Our city's slogan is every day counts. But we also want to make sure that you have what you need to show up in school every day and that we make it a place that you feel welcomed, loved, safe, and excited to be.
And that they can focus on the learning while they're there.
Absolutely.
How much of a part of that is after-school programs for kids?
So we do have strong after-school programs in DC. Again, it's a complicated web of some after-school providers that are connected to the school system, some that are outside of schools. But I think we want to make as much of every day a learning opportunity for our students.
All right, so we're running out of time here, and I knew that our time would fly. It's such a great resource. But so for folks listening, they're in the district, they're saying, I want to get more information. I don't live in Ward 6, but I want to talk to my person on the Board of Education. What's the best way for them to connect?
Absolutely. So if you go to sboe.dc.gov, you can find out who your state board representative is. You can find out how to contact them. And once you connect with them, they'll connect you to a whole wealth of resources within your community.
That is fantastic information. So I just want to thank my guest this morning. I've been speaking with Dr. Jessica Sutter. She is on the Board of Education in the District of Columbia, representing Ward 6. Thank you so much for joining me on ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. I'm Barbara Britt.